For 7 years, Maria served the same mysterious customer every Tuesday at 3:47 p.m. He always ordered black coffee, left exactly $3 tip, and never spoke more than 2 words. But on his final visit, he left something that would change everything she thought she knew about kindness, sacrifice, and the power of human connection. What Maria discovered in that envelope didn't just change her life. It revealed a secret that had been hiding in plain sight for nearly a decade. The truth is, that envelope contained 3 things: a letter that would make Maria cry, a photograph that would make her gasp, and something else. Something so unexpected that it would force her to confront a decision that could change not just her life, but her daughter's future forever. Danny's Diner sat on the corner of 5th and Main Street like a forgotten relic from a simpler time. The red vinyl booths had seen better decades. The checkered floor tiles were chipped and worn, and the fluorescent lights hummed with the persistence of insects on a summer night. But for Maria Rodriguez, this place represented something more precious than its shabby appearance suggested. It represented survival. Every morning at 5:30 a.m., Maria would push through the glass door marked with hand-painted letters that spelled Danny's in fading blue script. The bell above the door would announce her arrival with the same tired chime it had used for 30 years. She would tie her dark hair back into a ponytail, secure her apron around her waist, and begin the ritual that had sustained her family for the past 7 years. Maria was 34 years old, though the lines around her eyes suggested someone who had lived through more than her share of struggles. Her husband had left when their daughter Elena was barely 2 years old, disappearing one morning with nothing more than a note that said, "I can't do this anymore." The divorce papers arrived 3 months later, along with the crushing realization that she was completely on her own. Working at Danny's Diner wasn't Maria's dream job. Few people dream of serving coffee and burgers for tips that barely cover rent. But Danny Kowalski, the gruff 60-year-old owner, had given her a chance when nobody else would. He didn't ask too many questions about her lack of experience or her need to occasionally bring Elena to work when the babysitter canceled. He just handed her an apron and said, "Don't mess up my orders and we'll get along fine." The Tuesday routine had begun so gradually that Maria almost didn't notice it at first. Customers came and went, faces blurred together in the endless stream of coffee refills and plate clearing. But slowly, week by week, she began to recognize patterns. The construction workers who came in at 6 a.m. for coffee strong enough to wake the dead. The elderly couple who shared a piece of apple pie every Wednesday afternoon. The businessman who always sat alone in booth 7, typing furiously on his laptop while his eggs grew cold. And then there was the man in booth 12. He first appeared on a Tuesday in late September, 7 years ago. Maria remembered the day clearly because it was Elena's first day of kindergarten, and she had been distracted all morning, worried about how her daughter was adjusting to school. The man was probably in his 60s, with silver hair neatly combed and kind eyes that seemed to hold stories he'd never tell. He wore a simple gray cardigan over a white button-down shirt, and he carried himself with the quiet dignity of someone who had learned to find peace in solitude. "Coffee, please," he had said in a voice that was barely above a whisper. "Black." Maria poured his coffee, expecting him to order food or ask for the Wi-Fi password like most customers did. Instead, he simply nodded his thanks, wrapped his hands around the warm mug, and stared out the window at the busy street beyond. When he finished his coffee 30 minutes later, he left exactly $3 on the table, enough to cover the coffee and leave a modest tip, and walked out without another word. The following Tuesday, he appeared again. Same time, same booth, same order. This pattern continued week after week, month after month, until Maria began to expect him with the same certainty she expected the sun to rise. He became part of the landscape of her working life, as reliable as the broken jukebox in the corner and the persistent drip from the coffee machine that Danny kept promising to fix. What struck Maria most about the man wasn't just his consistency, but his solitude. In 7 years, she never saw him with another person. He never made phone calls, never brought reading material, never seemed to be waiting for anyone. He would simply sit in booth 12, drink his coffee, and observe the world through the diner's smudged windows with an expression that suggested he was searching for something he'd lost long ago. Maria tried to engage him in conversation numerous times over the years. She would comment on the weather, ask if he lived in the neighborhood, or compliment him on his consistently courteous manner. His responses were always polite, but minimal. "Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Have a good day." She began to wonder if perhaps he had difficulty with English, or if he was naturally shy, or if he was dealing with some form of grief that made conversation too painful. Despite his silence, Maria found herself looking forward to his visits. There was something comforting about his presence, something that suggested stability in a life that often felt chaotic. Elena would sometimes come to the diner after school, and Maria noticed that the man would glance over at her daughter with the expression she couldn't quite identify. It wasn't intrusive or inappropriate, more like the way someone might look at a painting they found beautiful but couldn't quite understand. What Maria didn't know was that the man in booth 12 was indeed watching, not just the street outside, but her. From his carefully chosen seat, he had an unobstructed view of the entire diner, and he used that vantage point to study Maria Rodriguez with the patience of someone who understood that some stories take time to unfold. His name was William Chen, though Maria would not learn this until much later. At 67 years old, William had lived through enough seasons of joy and sorrow to understand that life's most important moments often came disguised as ordinary encounters. He was a retired professor of literature who had spent 4 decades teaching students to recognize the profound themes hidden within seemingly simple narratives. Now, in his retirement, he found himself drawn to the real-life stories that played out in places like Danny's Diner. William had been coming to the diner long before Maria started working there. He had discovered the place during a particularly difficult period in his life, when his wife of 38 years was battling the cancer that would eventually claim her. In those final months, he would often sit in various booths, grading papers or preparing lectures, finding solace in the ambient noise of other people's conversations and the comfort of being around life continuing its daily rhythms. After Margaret passed away, William found it difficult to break the habit of coming to the diner. His empty house felt too quiet, too full of memories that seemed to echo off the walls. The diner offered him a place to be around people without the obligation of interaction, a refuge where he could feel less alone without having to explain his grief to well-meaning neighbors or concerned colleagues. It was during one of these solitary visits that he first noticed Maria. She was training with another waitress, clearly nervous and trying hard to remember orders and navigate the maze of tables without spilling anything. What caught William's attention wasn't her inexperience, everyone started somewhere, but the way she interacted with customers. Despite her obvious anxiety, she treated each person with genuine warmth and attention. She listened when the elderly man at table 4 told rambling stories about his grandchildren. She didn't rush the teenage girl who was clearly struggling to decide what she could afford to order. She cleaned up spilled coffee with good humor instead of irritation. Over the weeks that followed, William began to piece together Maria's story through casual observation and overheard conversations. He learned that she was a single mother, that she was working multiple jobs to make ends meet, and that she approached each challenge with a determination that reminded him of the heroines in the novels he had taught for so many years. He watched her handle difficult customers with grace, cover shifts for coworkers who called in sick, and somehow maintain her kindness even during the dinner rushes that left her exhausted and frazzled. But it was the way Maria interacted with her daughter that truly captured William's attention. Elena would sometimes come to the diner after school, a bright-eyed little girl with her mother's dark eyes and an infectious laugh that seemed to light up the entire room. William would watch from his booth as Maria would steal moments between customers to help Elena with homework, share a piece of pie, or simply listen to stories about her day. The love between mother and daughter was so evident, so pure, that it reminded William of the profound connections that make life worth living. As months turned into years, William found himself increasingly invested in Maria's well-being. He observed her struggles, the times she would close her eyes for just a moment when she thought no one was looking, clearly fighting exhaustion. The phone calls she would take in the back alley, speaking in urgent Spanish that he couldn't understand but recognized as the tone of someone trying to negotiate payment plans or extensions. The way she would carefully count her tips at the end of each shift, her face revealing whether it had been a good day or one that would require difficult choices about which bills to pay first. William also witnessed her triumphs, small though they might have seemed to casual observers. The day she received a larger tip from a satisfied customer and actually smiled, really smiled, for the first time in weeks. The afternoon Elena received an award at school, and Maria's face glowed with pride as she showed the certificate to anyone who would listen. The morning she announced to her co-workers that she had finally saved enough money to move Elena and herself into a better apartment, one where Elena could have her own room for the first time. It was during this period of observation that William began to understand something profound about the nature of heroism. In the books he had taught, heroes were often people who performed grand gestures or overcame dramatic obstacles. But watching Maria, he realized that there was a different kind of heroism in the daily choice to show up, to treat others with kindness despite your own struggles, to sacrifice your own comfort for your child's future, and to maintain hope when circumstances suggested that hope was foolish. As William's retirement progressed and his grief over Margaret's death began to soften into a different kind of sadness, one mixed with gratitude for the time they had shared, he found himself thinking more and more about legacy. What did it mean to have lived a good life? What was the point of accumulating wisdom and resources if you took them with you to the grave? How could someone who had been blessed with financial security and a fulfilling career give back to the world in a way that truly mattered? The answer, William realized, was sitting 3 booths away, refilling coffee cups and treating every customer like they were the most important person in the room, even when those customers barely acknowledged her existence. William's plan began to take shape gradually, born from countless Tuesday afternoon observations and a growing certainty that Maria Rodriguez represented something rare and precious in the world, a person whose goodness was so authentic that it radiated outward, touching everyone around her without expectation of reward or recognition. His first step was research. William had spent his career analyzing characters and motivations, and he applied those same skills to understanding Maria's situation more completely. Through careful listening and discreet inquiries with Danny, he learned about her work schedule. She pulled double shifts at the diner 4 days a week and worked at a cleaning service 3 evenings a week. He discovered that Elena was an exceptional student who dreamed of becoming a veterinarian, but that the cost of college seemed impossibly distant given their current circumstances. William also learned about Maria's character through direct experience. On several occasions, he accidentally left larger bills on his table to see what she would do. Each time, Maria would hurry after him to return the overpayment, insisting that he had made a mistake. When he assured her that it was intentional, she would accept the tip graciously, but never with the calculating look he had seen in other service workers, who viewed generous customers as opportunities to exploit. Once, William witnessed an incident that confirmed everything he had come to believe about Maria's nature. A well-dressed businessman had become increasingly agitated with his order, complaining loudly about the speed of service and the temperature of his food. His voice carried across the diner, creating an uncomfortable atmosphere that made other customers shift nervously in their seats. Instead of responding with irritation or defensiveness, Maria approached the man's table with genuine concern. "I'm so sorry you're having a difficult experience," she said softly. "Let me see what I can do to make this better for you." She didn't just comp his meal or offer a discount. She took the time to sit across from him for a few minutes and actually listen as he explained that he was dealing with a family crisis and was taking his stress out on everyone around him. By the time their conversation ended, the man was apologizing profusely and insisting on leaving a substantial tip, not because Maria had manipulated him into it, but because she had reminded him of his own humanity. It was after witnessing moments like this that William began to understand the full scope of what he wanted to do. This wasn't just about helping one deserving person. It was about investing in the kind of goodness that creates ripple effects throughout a community. Maria's kindness wasn't an act or a strategy. It was an integral part of who she was, and William believed that supporting her would ultimately benefit far more people than just Maria and Elena. The practical aspects of his plan required careful consideration. William had been blessed with financial security throughout his life. His professor's salary had been modest but sufficient, and Margaret's career as a nurse had supplemented their income nicely. They had lived frugally, saved diligently, and invested wisely. More importantly, they had never had children, which meant that William's inheritance would not be needed to support a next generation of family members. After Margaret's death, William had sold their large family home and moved into a smaller apartment, further increasing his available resources. His needs were simple: good books, decent coffee, and the occasional meal at places like Danny's Diner. The vast majority of his wealth was sitting in investment accounts, growing slowly but purposelessly. William spent months consulting with financial advisors and lawyers to structure his gift in a way that would be most beneficial for Maria, while also protecting her from potential complications. He learned about tax implications, scholarship fund structures, and the importance of creating legal documentation that would prevent any future disputes or misunderstandings. But even more challenging than the financial logistics was the emotional component of his plan. William understood that accepting such a substantial gift might be difficult for someone as proud and independent as Maria. He had watched her refuse charity from other customers and insist on earning everything she received. How could he present this gift in a way that honored her dignity while still achieving his goal of transforming her life? The answer came to him during one of his Tuesday visits, as he watched Maria patiently explaining the menu to an elderly customer who was having difficulty reading the small print. She wasn't just taking his order. She was taking the time to describe each dish, asking about his dietary restrictions, and making recommendations based on what she thought he might enjoy. It was an act of service that went far beyond her job requirements, performed without any expectation that her extra effort would be noticed or rewarded. That's when William realized that his gift should be presented not as charity, but as recognition. Acknowledgement of the value that Maria brought to the world through her daily choices to treat others with dignity and compassion. She wasn't being given something she didn't deserve. She was receiving something she had already earned through 7 years of consistent kindness. On a cold Tuesday morning in November, William sat at his kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had grown cold while he stared at a blank piece of paper. After months of planning and preparation, the time had finally come to write the letter that would accompany his gift. The words needed to be perfect, honest enough to convey his sincerity, clear enough to avoid confusion, and respectful enough to honor Maria's dignity. He had drafted dozens of versions over the past few weeks, each one feeling either too formal or too personal, too brief or too elaborate. How do you explain to someone that you've been watching them for 7 years without sounding invasive? How do you give away a substantial portion of your wealth without making the recipient feel burdened by obligation? How do you tell someone that they've restored your faith in human goodness without seeming overly sentimental? Finally, William decided to approach the letter the way he had approached teaching literature, by focusing on the universal themes that connected all human experience. He began to write, "Dear Maria, you don't know my name, but I have been privileged to witness your story unfold over the past 7 years from my seat in booth 12. Every Tuesday, I have watched you serve not just coffee and food, but kindness, dignity, and hope to everyone who enters Danny's Diner. What you may not realize is that your actions have served something equally important to at least one person. They have served as a reminder that goodness exists in the world, even when that world can seem dark and difficult. 7 years ago, I was a man struggling with grief and questioning whether life still held meaning after losing the person I loved most. I came to Danny's Diner seeking solitude, but instead I found inspiration in the form of a young woman who chose to treat every person she encountered with respect and compassion, regardless of how that person treated her in return. I have watched you work multiple jobs to provide for your daughter. I have seen you show patience with difficult customers, kindness to lonely regulars, and grace under pressure that would break many people. I have observed the way you make every person feel important, from the businessman rushing through his morning coffee to the elderly customer who wants to tell you about his grandchildren. Most importantly, I have witnessed the love and dedication you show to Elena, and the way you are raising her to be as kind and strong as her mother. Maria, you may think of yourself as just a waitress, but I want you to know that you are so much more than that. You are a teacher who shows others how to treat people with dignity. You are a healer who brings comfort to those who are struggling. You are a light in a world that sometimes feels dark. You are, in every sense of the word, an angel. I am a retired professor with no children and more resources than I need. After much thought and planning, I have decided to establish a fund that will accomplish 3 things. First, it will eliminate your financial stress by providing you with enough money to live comfortably without working multiple jobs. Second, it will create a scholarship fund to ensure that Elena can attend college and pursue her dreams of becoming a veterinarian. Third, it will establish an ongoing fund that you can use to continue the acts of kindness that I have watched you perform, but on a larger scale. This is not charity, Maria. This is recognition. You have already earned this through 7 years of consistent goodness. You have already proven your worthiness through countless small acts of service that you performed without expecting anything in return. This gift is simply the universe's way of acknowledging what you have given to others. I hope you will accept this gift in the spirit it is offered, not as an obligation, but as an opportunity. An opportunity to breathe a little easier, to spend more time with Elena, and to continue spreading the kindness that has already touched more lives than you will ever know. The envelope also contains a photograph. It was taken on Elena's first day of kindergarten, 7 years ago, when you brought her to the diner because your babysitter had canceled. You probably don't remember, but you were helping her with her homework while dealing with the lunch rush, and your face showed such pure love and determination that I knew I was witnessing something special. I asked Danny if I could take that picture because I wanted to remember the moment I realized that heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear aprons. Finally, there is one more item in this envelope, something that I hope will make you smile. It is a small token that represents all the coffee you have served me over the years, and all the warmth you have brought to my Tuesday afternoons. Maria, you have given me hope when I had lost it, purpose when I needed it, and faith in humanity when the world seemed cruel. Please allow me to give you something in return. With profound gratitude and respect, William Chen, your customer in booth 12. As William finished writing the letter, he realized that his hands were shaking slightly. This wasn't just a financial transaction. It was the culmination of 7 years of observation, reflection, and growing conviction that some people deserve to have their goodness recognized and rewarded. He carefully folded the letter and placed it in the envelope along with the photograph he had taken so many years ago, and a small golden coffee cup pin that he had commissioned from a local jeweler. The pin was inscribed with the words, "Angel in Booth 12, and was designed to be worn on a lapel or collar as a reminder of the impact that kindness can have on the world. But the most important item in the envelope was a legal document that outlined the establishment of the Maria Rodriguez Foundation, funded with an initial gift of $2.3 million and designed to provide Maria with financial security while also creating opportunities for her to help others in the community who were facing similar struggles. On what would be William's final Tuesday at Danny's Diner, he arrived earlier than usual. Instead of his customary 3:47 p.m., he walked through the door at 2:30, giving himself extra time to observe Maria's routine one last time, and to work up the courage for what he was about to do. The diner was relatively quiet during the mid-afternoon lull. A few regulars occupied their usual spots: the retired postal worker who came in every day for pie and coffee, the young mother who brought her toddler for an early dinner, the college student who spread textbooks across an entire booth while nursing a single cup of coffee for hours. Maria moved between the tables with her usual efficiency, refilling cups and clearing plates with the graceful economy of movement that comes from years of practice. William watched her interact with each customer, noting the small ways she made each person feel seen and valued. She complimented the postal worker on his new jacket. She brought crayons and paper for the toddler without being asked. She gently reminded the college student that she needed to order something besides coffee if she wanted to keep the booth during the dinner rush, but offered to let her move to the counter where she could study without taking up table space. These weren't grand gestures or calculated efforts to earn larger tips. They were simply expressions of Maria's fundamental belief that everyone deserved to be treated with kindness and respect. William realized that he was witnessing something that would soon end, at least in this form. After today, Maria would no longer need to work at Danny's Diner. She would have choices about how to spend her time and energy. He hoped that she would continue to choose kindness, but in new ways that would allow her to impact even more lives. When Maria approached his booth at precisely 3:47 p.m., William felt a surge of nervousness that surprised him. For 7 years, this interaction had been simple and predictable. Today, everything was about to change. "Coffee, please," he said, maintaining their traditional exchange. "Black." Maria poured his coffee with the same smooth motion she had perfected over thousands of similar interactions. As she set the cup down, William noticed that she seemed tired, more tired than usual. There were shadows under her eyes that suggested she had been working extra shifts to save money for Elena's school supplies, or perhaps to build a small cushion for emergencies. "Thank you," William said, and for the first time in 7 years, he added something more. Maria? She looked up, surprised to hear him use her name. I want you to know that your kindness has meant more to me than you could ever imagine. You have been a light in what was sometimes a very dark time in my life, and I will never forget the gift you gave me just by being yourself. Maria's expression softened, and she seemed about to respond when another customer called for her attention. She smiled at William, a warm, genuine smile that reached her eyes, and said, "Thank you for saying that. It means a lot." As she moved away to help other customers, William realized that this brief exchange had perfectly captured the essence of who Maria was. Even when surprised by an unexpected compliment, her first instinct was to express gratitude, rather than to deflect or minimize the praise. William sat in booth 12 for longer than usual that day, savoring his final view of the scene that had become so familiar. He watched Maria navigate the beginning of the dinner rush, her movements becoming more rapid but never less precise. He observed Elena arrive from school, settling into a corner booth with her homework while her mother worked. He noticed the way other customers seemed more relaxed in Maria's presence, as if her calm competence created a bubble of peace in the midst of the diner's controlled chaos. Finally, as the dinner crowd began to arrive in earnest, William knew it was time. He placed the envelope on the table, weighed down by his empty coffee cup. On the outside, he had written simply, "For the angel in booth 12, to be opened in private." He left his customary $3 for the coffee, but this time he added a $20 bill, not as a tip, but as a small gesture of appreciation for 7 years of perfect service. Then he stood up, took one last look around Danny's diner, and walked toward the door. As he reached the exit, William turned back for just a moment. Maria was busy taking an order at another table, but something made her glance in his direction. Their eyes met across the crowded diner, and William raised his hand in a small wave, a gesture of farewell that she probably interpreted as nothing more than a polite goodbye from a regular customer. But William knew it was much more than that. It was the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. It was a moment of completion that had been 7 years in the making. It was the final scene in a story that had taught him more about the nature of goodness than all the literature he had studied in his academic career. As the door of Danny's diner closed behind him, William Chen walked into the November afternoon with the satisfaction of someone who had found the perfect way to give back to the world. Behind him, in an envelope on table 12, lay the key to Maria Rodriguez's new life, a life that would allow her to continue being an angel, but with wings strong enough to soar. It wasn't until nearly an hour later that Maria noticed the envelope. The dinner rush had kept her busy, and it was only when she went to clear booth 12 that she saw the thick manila envelope propped against the salt shaker. Her first thought was that a customer had forgotten some important documents, and she should probably call Danny to see if anyone had reported leaving something behind. But then she read the inscription, "For the angel in booth 12, to be opened in private." Maria's heart began to race as she realized that this was meant for her. She looked around the busy diner, knowing that she couldn't open it here, surrounded by customers and co-workers. Whatever was inside deserved privacy and careful consideration. She tucked the envelope into her apron and continued working, but her mind kept returning to the mysterious gift and the customer who had called her an angel. It wasn't until her shift ended at 9 p.m. and Elena had finished her homework that Maria finally had a chance to examine the envelope properly. In the staff break room, with Elena drawing quietly at a nearby table, Maria carefully opened the envelope and began to read William's letter. With each paragraph, her eyes grew wider and her hands began to tremble. By the time she reached the end, tears were streaming down her face. Not tears of sadness, but tears of wonder, gratitude, and disbelief. "Mama, why are you crying?" Elena asked, looking up from her drawing with concern. Maria looked at her daughter, this bright, beautiful girl who had been her motivation for every double shift, every difficult customer, every moment when giving up would have been easier than continuing. Now, thanks to a stranger's recognition of her efforts, Elena's future was secure in ways that Maria had never dared to imagine. "I'm crying because sometimes," Maria said, pulling Elena into a hug that was filled with 7 years of love, struggle, and hope. "Angels are real." Outside Danny's diner, the Tuesday evening traffic moved through the intersection of 5th and Main Street, carrying people toward their own destinations and dreams. Inside, under the humming fluorescent lights, a waitress held an envelope that would change everything, while across town, a retired professor sat in his quiet apartment, finally understanding what it meant to leave a legacy that mattered. The story of the angel in booth 12 had reached its perfect ending, which was really just the beginning of something even more beautiful.